All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's live lunch convo here at Erie's Black Wall Street. I'm excited to be joined by Kyle Gallo from MacDonald Illig Attorneys to talk about the crucial topic of securing your future, which we like to call securing the bag, or the importance of estate planning. Estate planning is a vital part of protecting your assets, your family, and ensuring generational wealth, especially in communities that have historically faced systemic barriers. And so before we dive in, don't forget to mark your calendars for this Saturday's Mobilization Community Fun Day at Roger Young Park from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. There will be family fun, activities, bounce houses, food trucks, and essential voter information to make sure your voice is heard in the upcoming elections. And it's going to be a great time, so we hope to see you there. But let's get started with our conversation on how estate planning can help secure a brighter future for you and your family. So, Kyle, can you just start off by introducing yourself and telling us why you decided to go into this particular field of law?
So I went to Villanova Law School, went to law school like a lot of law students do, saying, well, I just want to help people. How can I help people? Didn't know exactly what that meant. I didn't really like the courtroom a lot. So in my second year, I took my first tax class, really liked that first tax class. And so I tried to figure out what sort of things could I do with this to help people out. And now I work with a lot of small businesses and with a lot of people who pass away or who are thinking about their children and other heirs.
Cool. So, what are like the key components of estate planning, like of a comprehensive estate plan? And like at what stage of life should somebody be like start thinking about it and start preparing for it?
Well, anybody can do it.
Mhm.
I think marriage or or purchasing a house, some large life event where now you have an asset or you have a individual who would be advantageous to make sure that they get your assets. We'll talk about an inheritance tax, but in Pennsylvania, if you're married, everything going to your spouse is taxed at 0%. So for a lot of people, they want to take the assets they've grown, whether through a business or working and saving and investing, and they want to move that to their spouse at a 0% rather than having to pay some taxes. But components are a will, general durable power of attorney, which is a financial power of attorney, and then a healthcare power of attorney.
Oh, so we're going to get into the healthcare one at the end here because people don't know how important that is too. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try to answer them as we go through. So let's just talk about like estate planning is sometimes seen as like only for wealthy people, only people who are well off. But why is it important for everyone, regardless of their income or their assets, to do estate planning?
Yeah. So I think it goes down to the fact that it's a plan, like anything.
Right.
If you're trying to go on vacation, if you're trying to finish something at work, finish something around the house, build a business, you need to have a plan in place. You want to make sure that those people you're leaving behind understand first what you have, two, what you would like done with it, and three, to make sure that it's done in the most efficient way.
Right.
So sometimes people have joint assets and they say, oh, well, mom had a house. Well, actually, mom owned a house with her sister. So it's not going to you. Don't think that now mom's in the hospital and it's going to you. It's actually going to her sister, right? So having that plan, even if you don't consider yourself wealthy, which today what is wealthy and what's not, it's important to, one, know what you have, know where you want it to go, and then understand and tell those individuals what you have and where you'd like it to go.
Yeah, it takes a lot of stress out when you have a plan in place, especially when a loved one does get sick or they end up passing away. It takes a lot of stress off of families and loved ones when there's actually something that can follow that says, hey, this is exactly what I would have wanted, and this is how I want it to be done. So that's one thing that I don't think we think of when it comes to like estate planning.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be that complicated. For a lot of people, simple wills are, I want everything to go to my spouse, and if not, go to my kids. And I want my favorite daughter or favorite son, or most responsible, we won't use favorite, but most responsible daughter to be the one to do it, because son may live in another state, might have a lot of kids and just say, I can't handle this. I'm working really hard right now. You live 3 blocks down from where mom is, you can go to the house and you can make it ready and sell it and work with the attorney and do all of those things. I can't handle this right now.
Mhm.
And then letting that child or sibling or parent know that,
Mhm.
once again, eases that stress.
Yeah, absolutely. So historically, Black families have faced systemic barriers that impacted homeownership and wealth building. So, how can estate planning serve as a tool to combat these issues to help ensure that wealth stays within that family?
Well, and I think once again, that's goes with the planning. I mean, it sounds great to say, well, we have the family home and we want it to go to all 4 of our children. That sounds great. But then all 4 children are owners. So who's going to live there? Are they going to sell it? How is that all going to work out? So with that planning, maybe somebody does need a little bit of a head start. Maybe they've had some instances where they're not in the best place right now. You pass away. You want them to have the house so they can grow, they
Right.
can learn some responsibility, and they can have that asset, whereas your other children are, maybe they had a little bit better lot in life, right?
Mhm.
So there's those are all considerations, rather than just saying, figure it out.
Yeah.
Because sometimes figure it out isn't best for everybody, and it
Mhm.
creates some hurdles and burdens.
I've experienced that before, where it creates some drama.
Mhm.
That if we have that plan, like you said, if we have that plan, it can eliminate a lot of that. So estate planning isn't always discussed in Black households, and there can be a reluctance to talk about death or passing on assets. How do you approach these conversations, and what advice do you have for families to overcome these cultural barriers?
Start small. I think it starts small. You know, we're talking about planning, we're talking about transparency with the loved one. I'm not saying go out there and tell all of your friends that wherever you hang out that you have this house and it's worth this much, and this is your retirement fund, and this is what's in each of your bank accounts, and and all that information. Don't be that transparent, but your children or the responsible child, just letting them know some assets or meeting with an attorney. A lot of clients I meet with, I just give them a simple questionnaire,
Mhm.
and it allows them to write down what they have. So when they do pass and their children say, I don't know anything, mom and dad wouldn't talk to me, I can at least say, okay, this is what we have, now we work through it.
Mhm.
And since you're past, now you don't have to worry about them maybe asking you for money or looking at you a little differently. And,
Mhm.
you know, I don't know if it's a trust, everyone's different. So I don't
Right.
know, I've never know if it's a trust thing
Mm.
or if it's just, I never had anything, so I never really wanted to want it. Some people I've even met with just don't know. They just
Mhm.
say, I work and my money goes into a 401k from my employer, I don't look at it. If I get a statement, I
Mm.
toss it. So sometimes people just don't know what they have.
Mm. I often think of it too as like when everybody dies.
Yeah.
And so we have to have this conversation, and we look at death as such like, oh, it's this taboo topic where it happens to all of us. So why not be prepared?
Yeah. And you talk about that planning. The way I always view it is that it's a lot of stress for a short amount of time. You
Mhm.
work with me for a couple of weeks or a month, then it's
Yeah.
done. That asset's in a trust, or the will is simple, or the house is now joint with responsible child, or
Mhm.
all the children. Whatever the plan happens to be, now it's done. And you can just say, I got this out of the way, even though you had to have a couple weeks of stress.
Mhm. So you talked about wills and trusts. So can you break down what the difference is between a will and a trust, and when might someone consider setting up a trust as a part of their estate?
Okay, so yeah, so the simplest way I can plan it is that a will dictates where your probate assets go. So your bank account, your house, if you own it in your own name by itself. When you die, well, then who owns it? It goes into probate, and either your will controls and says it goes to your, you know, your best friend, your army buddy from 50 years ago, or your kids, or your wife, or whoever you decide to go to, or then it goes to intestacy. And intestacy means that you don't have a will.
Mm.
So then the state decides where those assets go. And that can get a little messy because then maybe half goes to your parents, half go to kids, half go to a spouse. And that's where it can get a bit messy, and you're worried about taxes, inheritance tax at those points. So a will is for your probate assets. A trust, on the other hand, can hold those assets. And realistically, we talk about 2 kinds of trusts.
Okay.
We have a revocable trust. In the biggest advantage of a revocable trust is that you avoid that probate process.
Mm.
So you take your house, You put it in a revocable trust. You don't need to go down to the courthouse and open an estate because the trust owns it and has provisions that say, when I die, it goes to these three people, this one person. So it can help avoid, but you still have to pay inheritance tax. But what's good is you get flexibility. You can take it out tomorrow, put it in, take it out, continue putting assets in, take assets in, and then take them out. You can do whatever you want. That you have that flexibility, but you don't get a lot of these advantages. Irrevocable trusts, on the other hand, are a lot more stringent, a lot more strict, a lot more rules. So you get that additional advantage of maybe it not being subject to inheritance tax, maybe you being able to qualify for Medicaid or other programs because now you don't own that asset.
Right.
But at the same time, you're giving up that asset. So do you want $100,000 just poof, out of your hands and you can't use it anymore? For a lot of people, no. And that's when you get in the conversation with some people saying, you say you never really vacation. Are you sure you don't want to take a cruise or, go visit a state or go visit some relatives, or your son just moved? Maybe you're going to start visiting them. I keep telling you the son's going to move, but the daughter can move too.
Okay, cool. So how does estate planning ensure that property and assets like a family home are passed down smoothly and without disruptions?
I think it just goes back to that planning aspect. Everybody understands what's happening. It is on paper, it is sealed, it is ready to be, a lot of people call and say, I need a reading of the will. It's ready to be read and say, hey, Kira gets the house because that's what we decided, that's what we wanted. So it's all that planning aspect, like you said, when somebody gets sick or somebody passes away, it almost takes not a lot, but a little bit of that stress off, saying we have paperwork that says exactly what we're supposed to do, rather than saying, I don't know what to do. And I've met with a lot of people who just do nothing. And then 2-3 years go down, they get a bill or they get something from someone that says, oh, I didn't know I had to do something. And then you're 3 years apart. Oh, what accounts do they own? I don't know what accounts they own. They haven't been getting statements, and I don't know.
You and I talked off camera about how when some people get left a family home, they don't know that yes, grandma had this house, it was passed down to us, but there's still things that you're responsible for afterwards. So like, what are some things that people should be thinking of? Like, okay, house was passed down to me. Now I need to be worried about X, Y, and Z.
Property taxes, insurance, home maintenance, because a lot of the times, especially when you're talking about assets like a home, can you afford the home? Your parents were, because they had Social Security and they had retirement funds, but maybe you're just not in the place to be paying, property taxes, or maybe there is something that, because this happens a lot of times, I didn't know the basement was this bad. For mom and dad who were only going to live for 2-3 more years, it was fine. But now you have the basement, which needs $30,000-$40,000 of work, even though you just got an inheritance as well, or maybe you didn't, maybe you just got the house. Do you want to put $40,000 into this house, or would you rather sell it, or put a little bit of work, sell it, have that inheritance, and then try for your own house in a couple of years?
So let's talk about probate. So you briefly explained what it was, and it can be a lengthy process and costly process too. So how can a proper estate plan help families avoid probate or minimize its impact?
Yeah, so one of the most common things that we do is, if you have two spouses and one spouse passes away, putting the principal residence into a trust. If that's realistically the only probate asset that they will have in their own name. So, they have retirement accounts, but they have beneficiary designations. Or they have, maybe their bank accounts are joint with a child, so not a probate asset. But the house is in their name alone and they decide to put it into a trust. That helps avoid probate, because then it goes to the beneficiaries of the trust, rather than, like I said, going down to the courthouse, filing all the documents, getting short certificates, going and signing everything as the executor of the estate. Instead, you're the trustee of the trust, but all of that is done outside of the courthouse. Well, you have to record the deed, but for the most part, you're not having anything to be filed and anyone appointed.
That's cool. So besides distributing assets, what are some aspects of estate planning, such as healthcare derivatives or the power of attorney that you talked about earlier, that people should consider?
Yeah, so we always do too, and we think those two are very important because we always deal in the doom and gloom, the worst case
Right.
scenario.
Right.
And what's worse than dying? Well, what if you're extremely sick? You have all of these responsibilities, but you aren't able to act. Either you're not mentally capable to act, or maybe you're not physically able to act. You know, you can't sign documents, you can't do anything. So somebody needs to be doing some of these things for you.
Right.
So a healthcare directive really has two components, or it should. A healthcare proxy, so something you can give to your medical professionals to say, yes, HIPAA release, let this person know what's going on, and so that they can plan around the house or for me in how they need to. And then also a living will. So if I am ever in a position where a doctor goes to my agent and says, I think there's maybe a 2% chance of them coming back, they're not there. I don't think they're ever gonna wake up. They're still alive.
Right.
We won't have a death certificate in the next couple weeks, but do you want them to have water? Do you want us to perform CPR, do blood transfusions, things like that? Because that's important. Some people want everything. They say, I don't care, as long as my heart's beating, give me everything. And some people say, nope, if I'm gone, I'm gone. Really fun conversation. And then the other important one too is the general durable. So what if you do need to access bank accounts? What if you do need to sell? Maybe you are going to be in the hospital for a prolonged period or move to a long-term care facility, and they need to sell the house to be able to afford that. And it's owned jointly with somebody. They can't just sign on your behalf away to somebody.
Right.
So you need somebody to be able to sign that, and everybody's situation is different. So we always give a more comprehensive, especially to younger couples, because you never know what life's going to look like in 30 years.
Absolutely. I know, like, when my father was in the hospital, he got sick, and I was the responsible child, and my siblings were too. Thank God that we're all responsible. But having had conversations before and knowing what his wishes were, was something that kind of eased that burden and that stress off of us. So I definitely encourage people to make sure that you're getting that, because I mean, when it comes down to those, emergency situations, you definitely need to have some peace of mind there.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many other things you can do, right? Making sure your beneficiary designations are updated on any accounts that allow it. So if your spouse passes, then you don't want it to just go into probate. You want it to make sure that it goes directly to individuals. It also makes everything a lot faster too. You don't have to get somebody appointed to get the IRA or the 401k or the life insurance. It's going to go directly to you. They know who to send paperwork to. And then, yeah, I think like you said, it's a lot easier to tell, and use your discretion, of course. I mean, if you have a child who's responsible, but maybe her and her siblings don't have the best relationship, maybe you shouldn't tell her that she's getting the house if she would be a little, or he would be a little, I'm getting the house, right? You guys aren't getting anything. I'm the executor. Maybe leave a surprise for her in that, and give your attorney the information, and then let once you pass, let them come together with grieving instead of it sort of being combative while they're alive. You're alive. So sometimes you need to use discretion.
I completely agree. So we often think of estate planning, and we kind of touched on this, in terms of like death, of course, but how does it also help prepare people for unforeseen events like accidents, sudden illnesses, especially in ensuring that loved ones are protected?
So I think when it comes to unplanned, I think it's just that. I think it's going back to this whole theme of knowing what's supposed to happen and making sure. So one of the things that a lot of people think is, if you're married to your spouse, that under the laws of Pennsylvania, everything just goes to your spouse. Well, it doesn't. If you have kids or if you have parents. So if you have parents that are still alive, the first 30,000 of assets go to your spouse, and then it's split half between your spouse and your parents.
Oh, wow.
So for inheritance tax purposes, you might be thinking, oh, well, what's the big deal? My parents love my spouse, it's fine. But that's 4.5% tax on maybe part of the house, maybe your bank accounts, all of these different things that might have, might be taxed with not. And it's the same thing with kids. So if you have, kids of the same spouse, then it goes 50, or of your spouse, it goes 50-50. But if you're in a second marriage, you had children before you got married to some other individual, then it's same thing, first 30,000 to spouse, and then splitting in half. So it's one of those things too, that we look at it from a tax perspective. If you love your spouse and you know, through marriage, you own everything together, it's not great that if an accident happens, then, oh my gosh, there's actually half of it's gonna be taxed, potentially.
Wow, good information. So if you guys have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We just have a few more minutes here. So how often should people review or update their estate plan? And like what life events might trigger the need for a change?
Marriage, children, second marriage, third marriage, fourth marriage, buying properties. If you have a business, one of the things that with a lot of business owners we do are shareholder agreements. So with the person you own the business with, what happens if one of you dies? Does your partner get all of the business? Do the shares of your business go to your kids and then your partner has to buy them out? If you have a business that's doing good amounts of revenue and profit every single year, you want to make sure that, once again, everybody's in agreement of where this money is going.
Oh, yeah. Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh marriages.
You never know. Or, again, people have kids outside of marriage and maybe decide to never get married.
Yeah.
So maybe for, once again, talking about that tax implication, if you're living with a significant other who's not a spouse, that's 15%. So if you say, I want everything to go to my significant other, that's a 15% tax. Maybe you give some of that money to your kids and you put it in a trust until they're 21, or you try to work something like that so that that still, the kids are taken care of, your significant others taken care of, but you're not getting hit with 15%, because 15% of 100,000 is 15 grand.
Right. It's gone. Poof, gone. So for those who are watching today and realizing that they need to start estate planning like yesterday, what's the first step they should take? And then how can they begin the process with you and your firm too?
Just call in. We do cold calls all the time where we'll talk, we'll meet. Like I said before, I'll send out a questionnaire sort of asking for, where do you live? Who are the people who are important in your life? The interested parties, I guess. What sort of assets do you own? What kind of debts do you own? Do you have a really nice car, but it's a $49,000 car loan? Because once again, you get other situations like that. Oh, my mother had the most beautiful house. Ooh, there was $200,000 of debt on it. Not really the most beautiful home in the world now, or we need to sell it. I know you want to keep it, but I don't think you can afford them to take over that mortgage. So I think it's realistically just meeting with somebody and talking these things out.
All right, so guys, get on it because you should be estate planning. So thank you, Kyle, for sharing your expertise with us today and just shedding light on the importance of estate planning, or like we called the session, securing your future. It's clear that securing your future through proper planning makes all the difference in protecting your family, your home, your legacy. And so for everyone that tuned in, I hope you gain valuable insights and feel empowered to take that next step in securing your own future. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Kyle and his team at MacDonald Illig Attorneys. And before we sign off, don't forget about the Mobilization Community Fun Day happening this Saturday at Roger Young Park from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Bring your family for a day of fun, food trucks, and important voter information. We look forward to seeing you there. So thank you once again, Kyle, for joining us today. And stay tuned for the next episode, everyone. We will have Erie Insurance, who will be talking about everything HR. Have a great day.